Hello, everybody, and welcome to our September webinar on getting more from your data labeling operations. My name is Bernard Laws, Solutions Engineer at Hartex, and today I'll take you through some of the top challenges for data labeling. Both seasoned and enterprise companies that are new to ML often fail to scale their labeling process. ML models for pattern recognition require accurately labeled data. However, establishing various annotation types, ontologies, attributes to train these models is very time-consuming, very difficult, can be very costly. Inaccurately or inconsistently labeled data can severely undermine your AI projects. It does so by invalidating your predictive model. So identifying and responding to pitfalls are critical to the success of any AI project. The agenda today will be very short and straight to the point. We're going to explore a real-world scenario that many organizations run into. We'll see how Label Studio helps to solve these challenges, and we'll finally take a moment to summarize what we've shown and open the floor to Q&A. So let's take a look at the scenario. Artificial intelligence is the new gold rush for many companies. Companies are attempting to leverage AI to automate and accelerate their business processes, maybe even identify new processes. Acme, our prestigious company we're going to use for this talk, is no different, and they share the same problems as their peers in terms of data quality, data labeling, improving model confidence. The use cases involve a variety of data formats, from images to text to time series, and they're even considering to look into video and audio in the following year. However, many of the annotators are interns. So we're talking about Acme company again, right? Our fictitious company, or busy staff members with little time to learn new software. And right now, Acme is using a number of different disconnected labeling solutions based on use case, based on data type, etc. Nevertheless, they have deadlines to deploy these ML models and at the end of Q2, and it's heavy on their minds. So let's take a deeper look at Acme. Derek is a business lead. He's tasked with identifying business challenges that can be solved by AI. His biggest challenge is the lack of central governance right now, lack of oversight. Along with inefficiencies this introduces, he's concerned about data security, disruption of product releases. Heidi, who works with Derek, owns the delivery of product features and is under tight deadlines. She has to balance multiple priorities, from the stakeholders on one hand, subject matter experts, the end users who are ultimately going to use these models, and enabling annotators to use the various homegrown and commercial labeling solutions that they have right now. Shay, as a data scientist, he's in charge of deploying these models, bringing them to production, monitoring their performance, and debugging. Problem is, he knows garbage in, garbage out. Incorrectly labeled data disrupts model optimization and ultimately deployment. He needs to identify labeling QA problems, quality problems, before they result in costly rework. Finally, David is head of operations of the team of about 10, and these are subject matter experts in the area that they are applying these models. His team of 10 are the only ones in the organization with the domain expertise to understand data, but there's a lot of data. So they brought in a lot of interns and other staff members to help with labeling the data, as we mentioned earlier. So we set the stage. So up until now, Acme has hacked together and glued together a set of internal tools with tons of boilerplate code made to work once. As you can imagine, sharing the tools, extending them, embedding them to the main application or the use cases have been very, very problematic, right? Nevertheless, Acme is always looking for ways to improve quality, handle edge cases, and test hypotheses. After a lot of frustration, they decided to take a look at Label Studio. Now, as Acme's already seen, many existing labeling frameworks accept only one data type, and becomes tedious to learn a new app each time. Annotators complain, reviewers complain, they have a lot of mishaps. Right out of the box, Label Studio works with text, images, audio, HTML documents, any imaginable combination of annotation tasks like classification, regression, tagging, spanning, so on, object detection, and so on, right? So Label Studio makes it simple, no complicated configs, and ease of integration with machine learning pipelines. But instead of me telling you about it, let's explore how Acme's team, Heidi and her team, leverage Label Studio to improve security, track progress, manage tasks, monitor quality, and ultimately meet those deadlines to deploy reliable models to their internal and external customers. Now I'm going to get out of presentation mode here and go into the Label Studio So when Heidi set up the organization, set up her Label Studio enterprise organization, the very first page she sees is this page. What you're looking at is the organization page that allows us to invite people into organization, either through SSO integration or to provide a link that we can provide a link here to them or invite them by email and select their role. You notice that there are 4 roles here: annotator, reviewer, manager, and administrator. Annotator being the lowest level role where a person can only annotate the data. Reviewer can review the data, but also annotate it. A manager can manage who can review and annotate, but also annotate. An administrator would have full access to the to all of the projects. So what happens is we can establish the different roles at this point, and we can also take a look at what the individuals have been working on throughout the time. So we've got logs of information in terms of what they've been working on, whether they work through the UI or through the API. Now, once we've established organization, we've invited the people we want into the organization. Heidi was able to go into her projects, and she was able to set up workspaces. And these workspaces are ways that she organizes projects. You can see here, she's got projects for images, projects for NLP, projects for audio, time series. And in each of these projects, she's able to define who she wants in it. So she can manage the members that are involved in the project. So she can say, of all the people in my organization, I want these specific people inside this workspace to have access to all the projects in this workspace. Now, that level of control is the second tier, right? We've got the organization level, we've got the workspace level, but finally we also have the project level. So even at the project level, I can define specifically who I want in the project. So although there are 10 people as part of the workspace, there are 3 people who are specifically assigned to this project, and only they would have access to that project. Now, she's created workspaces based on teams or use cases, as we see here. She wants to create a project. She would simply go in and click on Create Project. At this point, she would give it a new project name, and then she would go into labeling setup. And as we said earlier, right now they're doing a lot of text, a lot of video, a lot of time series, but they may go into video and audio in the future. Well, no need to work, to have multiple platforms. She simply needs to use Label Studio, and she has access to everything, whether it's computer vision for object detection, segmentation, image classification, to natural language processing, to audio processing, conversational AI, time series videos, whatever the use case is, you'd be able to do it within one platform. And finally, importing data. So in terms of importing data, you can essentially import any form, nearly all formats of data into Label Studio. So whether it's images, sound, CSV, video, etc., you could import the data into here. Now, you could drag and drop or upload the files directly here, but I'm going to show you a much more robust way to do that. Better best practice is to use your cloud storage. We'll talk about that shortly. So I'm going to delete this project because essentially at this point, you would click save and this would create the project of your choice. So the project, let's say if we were to do object detection, right? We would have this interface here where we could design the project. And we see here on the right-hand side is how the annotator and reviewer would see the project. They would see an image, they would see the options they have to annotate, let's say an airplane, right? And or a car, but they can also add additional labels here. They can also add additional controls. Maybe I want to provide controls to rotate the image. Right now, the annotator would have the ability to zoom through the image, but maybe I want to add the ability to rotate the image. Now the annotator has the option to rotate the image. I can go into the code and do even further controls. For example, maybe I want to add a brightness control. And this would allow the annotator to control the brightness of the image. So now we have a new brightness control here to control the brightness of the image. So a lot of customization can be made right here within the platform. Again, not having to rely on going to another solution to do your labeling. So we're going to go ahead and delete this here and take a look at a specific project that's already built. So Heidi goes into her project and she sees that this data manager with all of the tasks that have been that she's brought into the project. All these tasks are essentially data that require labeling. We can see here in this task manager that most of the data has been annotated by at least one person so far. We can see the completion date for the annotation, right? And we can see whether it's been annotated, skipped, whether or not there's a prediction been made through an ML model, and who's done the annotation, right? If anyone's reviewed it, as we see in these two cases, we can see who's reviewed it and whether or not they've approved or disapproved of it, right? Now, what interesting that you see here is agreement. We can see here that this first task, 3 people have annotated and they pretty much agree what they need to annotate, right? So this says, you know, I probably have no problem with this particular task. This task has been well annotated. I see high quality here. But if I want to dig in a little deeper, because I'm seeing there are some problems here. So I would dig in by clicking on the members page. So once we go into members page, Heidi's able to get, Heidi or any of her administrative team will be able to see a lot more information about the project in terms of the project, the progress of the project, in terms of the progress of specific people. So we see here, if we take a look here, we see that there are several people who are part of the project, but they've not contributed, right? But there are people who have contributed. We see about 4 people who've actually done some contribution. And we can see that Bernard, Duns Leno, Laws Works, Jonah have all contributed. And we can take a look at how many tasks they finished, how many tasks they've skipped, whether they're approved or not, right? And what's their overall review score, how much time they've taken to do the annotations. For example, we saw one taking a minute and the other is taking 30 seconds. Maybe there's a problem understanding with that one, right? Now, we also see this information here in terms of agreement matrix. Now, what do we mean by agreement matrix? Probably easier if I were to just go ahead and expand this and show everyone. All right, so we can see that Don Leno didn't agree very well with Bernard on a lot of the projects, whereas Jonah did agree with Bernard a little more. So we see that there's definitely some agreement issues within the project. This means that either the annotator does not know what needs to be labeled. It may mean that the data, maybe there's an issue with the data, but either way, there's a problem if they're not agreeing on what the annotation should be. So I can dive into a particular set. So let's take a look at Bernard. He's done 10 tasks. He's got an agreement score of about 52%. That's problematic for me. I click into there and I can see all of the data he has worked on. I know that it's all Bernard's things because it is filtered automatically with annotators, that annotations that were done by Bernard, right? And I can take a look at specific data sets, a specific tasks that were annotated. For example, I click on this third task here, and I can see that Donis Leno annotated this one car. Okay, looks good. Laws Works, however, annotated 3 cars. Okay, that explains to me why there was not a good score for the agreement. So either there is a disagreement on what needs to be annotated, or you know, again, there's some instruction failure, some enablement failure in the process. So what's important is that this problem is identified early on before you know, a project is, you know, fully annotated and sent back into the model. How do we do that? We go to a settings page, which would be available only to the administrator. We can do a number of things. First of all, we can control how tasks are queued and managed to the annotators, whether it's done automatically, manually. We can also you know, provide specific instructions to the annotation, to the annotators. We can say, please annotate all vehicles, even the ones in the back, right? So in that case, we can provide instructions directly to the annotators. We can you know, allow them to skip an annotation, and if skipped, how is that requeued? Is it sent back to the annotator or sent back to the pool of annotators and how the tasks are ordered, whether it's through uncertainty sampling based on an AI model, or if it's going to be completely random or based on the data manager that we just showed earlier. We also have some control on what the reviewer is, how the reviewer performs the annotation, whether it is done through the whether they're able to see who has done the annotation. We may want to anonymize the annotators so that there's no potential bias from the reviewer to the annotator, and whether or not we want to show the data managers to the reviewer. And finally, most important is what we were talking about quality earlier. And we spoke a lot about quality when we looked at the members page. We talked about inter-annotator agreement matrix, right? So what I can do here at this point is establish, I want to have 20%, 25%, whatever percentage of my task to be annotated by X number of people, right? And what this will do is this will make sure that for this project to complete, the 9 tasks will be overlapped by 3 people before the remaining tasks are put into the queue for annotation, right? And so in this way, within the first 9 tasks, I know if my annotators are speaking the same language in terms of how they annotate. The inter-annotator agreement can be established through a number of metrics. So we can choose from any one of these. If we have something specific we want to look for, we can create a custom metric to determine whether or not there's an agreement. But also we can add weights to the different components. Maybe it's more important that the annotator annotates vehicles, but it's not so important that they annotate humans. Or maybe like if we're looking in the sky, we want to say, well, it's important that they identify the plane, but if they don't see if they don't agree with the cloud, we can say, put 40% weight on that so that it's not as important as the other items we want to find. So we can, establish these things within the quality tab so that we can generate that quality score that we saw in the members page earlier. And finally, we can bring in a machine learning model through providing the endpoint to the model here, and that model will enable AI-assisted labeling, but also that model can be retrained through webhook in Label Studio that will send the annotations as annotators continue to make annotations in it back to the model. And finally, cloud storage. So we spoke earlier about dragging and dropping the data into the cloud storage. One of the challenges that Heidi and her team had earlier, as we spoke of earlier, was security of data, right? They want to be able to keep all their data in one place. And so with Label Studio Enterprise, you're able to connect any one of the cloud storages that you want to use, even the ones that are not listed here. So you can, if you want to do AWS, Google Cloud Storage, Microsoft Azure. One in particular is the AWS S3 IAM role access, which is actually specific to Label Studio Enterprise. And that would enable you to connect to your S3 with just essentially the external ID that comes through, that's provided by Label Studio. You create a trust policy inside AWS for that. And so essentially, what we're seeing here is that Heidi is now able to secure her data behind cloud storage. She's able to bring in machine learning model so that there is AI-assisted labeling, but also that can feed back into an active learning role. She's able to track and monitor the progress of her team through inter-annotator agreement matrix, whether or not they match up with the ground truth. But the last thing I want to show you is how efficiency can be improved through the labeling process. Now, what I've shown you at this point has been what the administrator sees. How does the annotator see? An annotator would see that design that we showed earlier. So an annotator would see not the data manager we're just looking at, but they would see, okay, I've got this image and I've tasked with annotating it. I would go in, label the airplane. Maybe there's more information that I'm tasked with explaining about it. So maybe I want to say it's a commercial airplane and it's a passenger airplane, and I probably want to add more information on it landing, right? And I could submit this as an annotation, right? Or I can go in, of course, and do a little bit more annotations and finally submit that. So this is what an annotator would see. How would a reviewer see? Well, actually, before you go into that, what if an annotator was not sure? Well, is that a boat or an airplane? Well, one thing they could do is add a comment and ask the reviewer, not sure if that is a boat, right? And so, they may want to do this and leave this comment. They could skip it, submit it, whatever it is. But let's say they were to skip it. They have the option to skip that. So while they can communicate with the reviewer can also communicate with them as well. And so this can go back and forth to improve the efficiency of the labeling. You don't have rogue labelers labeling while making their best guess. If they're unsure, they can communicate with a subject matter expert to go back and forth and find out how they should label the data. And so with that, Heidi was able to solve, those three main problems: how to collaboratively do the labeling so that to improve efficiency, how to improve security, but also how to track progress and monitor quality. Just to recap what we take a look at again. So Heidi she's very happy. She's able to manage her the queue. She's able to understand how many tasks are left, what's undone. She's able to have everything all in one place and manage who has access to what. So security is on point. The tasks that are not done when they get done, she's able to basically plan out and forecast for Derek for when a project will complete. Right, through the inter-annotator agreement matrix and reviewer mode, she's able to identify bottlenecks very early. Enablement, to employ enablement issues, like LawsWorks doesn't understand how to label a certain data set or how to label a certain data type. Get that solved early before these inconsistencies lead to faulty models later on. Finally, she's able to integrate through being able to integrate a machine learning model. She's able to bring in that knowledge from a model back into the labeling to speed the process up, but also to continually train that model while the annotations are going on. So with that, I want to really open the floor for questions. Anything that comes up to mind in this scenario. Okay, first question, okay, so about sensitive data. All right, yes, so in terms of sensitive data, in terms of what are the best practices for working with sensitive data in Label Studio Enterprise, I would say the main focus would be the cloud storage. As I shared earlier, in the settings, you can connect to your cloud storage through the cloud storage tab here. So if we were to go here, we can choose from any one of these cloud storage tools. And this one here, I said, perhaps the easiest would be, you set up an AWS trust policy and be able to connect your AWS to your Label Studio Enterprise organization here. Now, if we can expound on that just a bit, so why would you use cloud storage as opposed to just dragging and dropping into it? Well, because then the data remains in your control. So our security model works like this. So here is your browser. This is the authentication layer. It connects to Label Studio, right? And the tasks are here inside the PostgreSQL. And those tasks are sent to the browser, and the browser essentially retrieves the images or the data, whatever is on your AWS, your Google Cloud Storage, your Azure. It retrieves it and it's shown within the browser. The data never ever goes into Label Studio, so there is no third-party access to your Label Studio. So you would have, let's say a VPN that's, that your users are behind, that your cloud storage is behind, and you would just simply connect to Label Studio, get the pointers to the cloud storage, and that would be fed back to you. That's how many of our customers who are working with sensitive data like PII, PHI data, accounting, financial information, they work in this way. I hope that answers your question. Okay, what data formats? Yeah, so I mean, really essentially anything from image data, text, audio, time series, video, and the number of supported formats continue to grow. We have quite a few in our pipeline, but really there's as we showed earlier in that creation step, as we showed earlier in the project creation step, there are a number of formats you could bring in. Everything from time series to video, audio, text, computer vision, in a variety of different use cases. Oh, okay. Can you expound a bit on active learning? Okay, so as we spoke earlier, in terms of the establishing the machine learning model, right? So once you've established your machine learning model through here, through adding a model into your project, what will happen is it will, be able to make predictions onto your project. So if I were to take a look at, let's say, this here. So this prediction has been made for by the machine learning model for that it's a boat. We see here other predictions that were made by the machine learning model in terms of this here being a boat, right? So once you've made the connection, the machine learning model starts to make those predictions within the data of the data within your data manager. It creates a webhook that enables you to continuously feed that information back to your model. What you would do is you would configure your fit function in the machine learning backend to determine at what point the retraining occurs. So essentially, once you connect your label studio to your ML backend, that webhook will send the labels made by annotators back to the model, and you configure the fit function to determine when, at what point, maybe the X number of annotations come in, then retrain. That's how you set up the active learning situation. Okay. Oh, yes. So essentially, in terms of the question here is, how is Label Studio Enterprise different than Label Studio? So one of the ways you can take a look at the differences between Label Studio and Label Studio Enterprise is you can take a look at, if you go to labelstudio.io, you go to documentation, there's, a number of features that are enterprise specific you can take a look at. But if we were to go into this features page, we can identify some of the key features that differentiate Label Studio open source to Label Studio Enterprise. And really some of the key features is really the collaborative piece of it. So in terms of annotator performance, user management, our key analytics and reporting, those are key differentiators to the open source version and the enterprise version. API. Yes, we did not cover API in this conversation. However, if we were to want to take a look at the API documentation is actually on our website. So if you were to go to API reference, you have a number of API calls you can make into Label Studio, and essentially just about everything you could do through the UI, you can do through the API. Right, so you have examples on this page, and this would be able to guide you through performing any kind of API action you want to do, whether it's creating projects, getting a list of projects, adding users, etc. Those kinds of things can all be done through the API. Okay, don't see any other question. Nate, you're welcome to let me know if anything else comes in. With that, I want to say thank you very much for joining, and I would encourage you to, if you want to learn more about Label Studio, you can reach out to us at sales@hardtext.com. The documentation page I just showed you talks about API, talks about how to install Label Studio, open source version. Here, if you want to get started with taking a look at the enterprise, where you're taking a look at all of the collaborative functionality that's shown today, I would invite you to take a look at our free trial that's available right now. Just click on, well, not click on this link, but just app@hardtext.com, user trial. You'd be able to start your trial of Label Studio Enterprise right now.